Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Public Works for today, Friday, January 19, 2017.
Commissioner Repenning, James Davis, and Jacinto are present. President James, we do have a quorum. May we start with Bureau introductions, please, starting with Bureau of Street Services.
Good morning, Tim Tyson, Bureau of Street Services.
Mike Mullen, Bureau of Sanitation.
Good morning, Kimberly Fitzpatrick, Bureau of Contract Administration.
Good morning, Steve Chen, Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, Ruben Flamenco, Bureau of Street Lighting.
Good morning, Ted Jordan, Public Works General Counsel.
Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. President James, we received speaker cards under General Public Comment. We have no commentary under the Neighborhood Council Comment section. We also received speaker cards on items 1, 2, and 3. In addition to that, we received a series of emails on item number 1 and 3 that have been distributed to all commissioners as well.
Okay, and just for the record regarding the receipt of emails on agenda item number 1, I've been getting emails on this for months. So we're probably well over 100 comments that, and we have responded to each of them, every one of them, to let them know that that their comments have been made part of the record.
Yes, we have.
Let's start with number 2. It's a tree removal at 11580 Sunshine Terrace. And Mr. Tyson, there has been a request by the applicant to continue the item to Friday, February 23rd for a number of different reasons, correct?
That's correct, President James.
Okay, I don't have any problem doing that. So we will continue agenda item number 2 without objection to February 23rd, 2018, including the public hearing on that. Obviously, the public hearing on that. Let's go to number 3. We will read number 3 into the record. I have a couple of just procedural questions. Agenda item number 3, Council District 4, tree removal at 2251 Nichols Canyon Road. Recommending that the board certify that the board has reviewed and considered the information in the addendum to the MND, the mitigated negative declaration, for the project at 2251 Nichols Canyon Road to find the information contained therein appropriately addresses the requested tree removals. 2, find that the project will not have a significant environmental effect under the above described addendum to the MND, as the imposition of mitigation measures described in the addendum and incorporated herein as project conditions, and that there is no substantial evidence the proposed project will have a significant effect on the environment pursuant to the city's environmental guidelines and is in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. That's CEQA. Number 3, find that the project's conflict with any local policies or ordinances protecting biological resources, such as tree preservation policies or ordinances, is less than significant with the incorporation and mitigation measures 4-80 as contained in the addendum to the mitigated negative declaration. Number 4, adopt the addendum to the MND. Number 5, specify that the Bureau of Street Services Urban Forestry Division, located at 1149 South Broadway, is custodian of the documents or other material that constitute the record of proceedings upon which the board's decision is based. And number 6, approve the request for a fee tree removal permit for 1 Southern California walnut tree, 2 Western sycamore, and 4 California bay laurel trees due to new home construction and required grading. Mr. Tyson, on number 3, this was continued from December 18th, 2017. That was our final meeting of the calendar year December 2017, correct?
Correct.
And we did have the summary and public hearing on the item that we did not close, but we had it on December 18th. Am I right about that?
It was read into the record. Yes.
And did you summarize it at all for us?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hall, were you here on December 18th? Okay. Could I have you up to the microphone, Mr. Hall? Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year. I'm going to get to your substance today, but I want to go back to December 18th.
Sure.
Refresh my recollection on kind of what we talked about on December 18th
Sure.
with your communication that came in that day.
Sure. So like many projects, this one we only had 72 hours notice. Come here with a letter. The applicant's here. Continuance. We committed to reach out to the applicant. The applicant went on a holiday to Australia. They got back. We had a meeting this last Tuesday with the residents. We discussed a lot of the issues. We asked for a further continuance so we could talk about design changes, and the applicant declined to continue or to make design changes, and so we're here to discuss the merits of this case.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So I guess what I would like to do then, Mr. Tyson, let's go ahead and get to your summary, and then we will hear from Mr. Hall and get his summary. Mr. Hall, can we have your summary? Do you need 5 minutes? Okay. So we'll hear from Mr. Tyson, even if you're repeating yourself a bit in summary fashion, Mr. Tyson. Because let me tell you, Mr. Hall, what I plan on, what I'd like to suggest today. I don't know that we're going to be able to make a resolution today based on a summary that I've heard from Mr. Tyson already, but I want to close the public hearing on this at the end of the day. And if we have to have a subsequent hearing, so be it. But as far as the public comment on this item, we're going to finish that today. So since we already had one chapter of this already. So go ahead, Mr. Tyson.
Okay. The Bureau was contacted by Nichols Development, who is the owner, and is proposing to construct a new 8,183 square foot single-family residence at 2251 Nichols Canyon Road. The subject property is located on a hillside lot that slopes up from a ravine and includes a year-round spring-fed creek. The proposed residence will have a footprint of approximately 2,745 square feet with a residential floor of 11.9% on a parcel measuring 22,898 square feet. In response to Mr. Payan's inquiry, Mr. Payan was directed to obtain services from the Los Angeles Municipal Code defined tree expert and hired Ms. Lisa Smith, registered consulting arborist. Mrs. Smith's tree report indicates the property contains 11 native protected trees comprised of 3 Southern California black walnut trees, 3 western sycamore trees, and 5 California bay laurel trees. The trees are in fair health and range in sizes from 5 inches to 36 inches in diameter by approximately 18 to 60 feet in height. 7 of the 11 protected trees on the property will be severely impacted by the project's construction and grading requirements, and they are proposed for removal. 4, numbers 7 through 10 California Bay Laurels, 1, number 5 Western Sycamore, and 1, number 3 Southern California Black Walnut tree are located within and directly adjacent to the proposed home and will be severely impacted by home construction and require grading. And 1, number 1 Southern California Western Sycamore tree will be severely impacted by a driveway suspended over a ravine. The remaining 4 protected trees shall be minimally impacted and retained in place. A Bureau arborist inspected the location on September 21st, 2016, and found the trees in property condition are as stated in the protected tree report. If approved, the applicant shall plant 8 36-inch box-sized western sycamore trees, 4 5-gallon-sized Southern California black walnut trees, and 16 15-gallon-sized California bay laurel trees on site to replace the removed trees. Community Forest Advisory Committee was contacted, as well as the council office, and we've heard this once now, and I've repeated it back in that we did get some new information that the sycamore trees actually have polyphagous shot hole borer holes in them, which means they've been hit by polyphagous shot hole borer. Yes, it is. It's transmitted by a bug. And
Has the Bureau of Street Services been able to confirm that?
we have photos of the shot hole borer, but we haven't went out to look at that yet.
Okay.
This came in after. as well as the MND. There's with the running creek that goes through the property. Hydrology study should have been made as far as the environment was concerned with those things, and the Bureau takes a stance right now that we need to get back with city planning and discuss the absence of that study in this mitigated negative declaration.
The Bureau thinks that.
I'm sorry?
The Bureau thinks that? The Bureau would like to get back to planning on that.
Yes.
So in other words, the Bureau is asking for a continuance.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tyson. All right. Any questions for Mr. Tyson before we go to Mr. Hall? Okay. Mr. Hall.
Good morning, Jamie Hall with Channel Law Group here on behalf of the residents who have formed under Preserve Nichols Canyon. I want to discuss, first of all, the unique, significant nature of this property. If you've ever been to Nichols Canyon, if you're a cyclist, you'll notice it is one of the most beautiful locations in the city of Los Angeles in the Santa Monica Mountains, with a year-round stream and creek that's running. And that's hugely significant because it brings with it an abundance of wildlife that come to the stream to drink and they call that area home. This is an undeveloped parcel that has never been developed, and it's located in Habitat Linkage Zone number 44, which was mapped by the Conservancy. And shockingly, in addition to the fact that the hydrology was not analyzed under the M&D, and yet there's a stream on the property, the M&D concluded that there would be no impact on habitat conservation. No impact. How can that be? I've submitted today pictures of deer, heron, coyotes, frogs, raccoon, hummingbirds, and we know that there's got to be a lot more. And this is something that needs to be analyzed. And the board can't take an action on this project until a fully complete environmental clearance document is prepared and there's mitigation measures that are proposed. And on that issue of wildlife and the impact on biological resources, I want to highlight the fact that the Santa Monica Mountains Comprehensive Plan was commissioned in 1979. And that was directed by the legislature to be prepared. And the city of Los Angeles in August of 1979 resolved that they would implement the plan. And the plan talks about there being 90,000 acres of a wildlife network in the Santa Monica Mountains. And on page 9 of my letter, there's a screenshot from the plan, and it's a discussion about the riparian habitat and how important that is to wildlife. It says riparian and oak woodlands make up a small percentage of the Santa Monica Mountains, yet support a wide range of wildlife. And only 4.5% of the Santa Monica Mountains have this really perfect blend of things that are needed to support the animals that call the Santa Monica Mountains home. So we owe it to ourselves to go back and do a proper environmental analysis for this project and look at the impacts on biological resources and propose mitigation measures. And I know that there's some commissioners who like to get into the design issues. And so I want to highlight the fact that this house is proposed to be 8,000 square feet. If you go into ZEMAS, the city's planning tool, you'll see that the normal homes in the area are about 2,500, 3,000 square feet. So this house is quite large for the area. And I think that bears on what reasonable development is. And if this house was reduced in size and the retaining walls were moved further from the property line and the driveway was relocated, you could save 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, well, you could save multiple trees. I show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees could be saved. And this is what we come here and we urge you to do, is to say, do some alternatives analysis. Choose the environmentally superior alternative. Don't just take the footprint of the home as proposed by the applicant and say, well, those trees are in the way, so therefore we have to remove those trees. And we come here to create better projects, not to kill projects. and also to preserve the environment. There's some other procedural issues that I raised at the last December 18th hearing. Nichols Canyon is less than 20 feet wide in some parts. You have to have a minimum continuous paved roadway of 20 feet all the way to the project site. Otherwise, you have to get a variance from the city. It's called a zoning administrator's determination. And one of the common mitigation measures implemented by the city under these circumstances is a requirement that the applicant widen the roadway in front of the property. So we have some procedural problems here too. The environmental clearance document is incomplete, and that's about it. The residents continue to stay willing and ready to work with the applicant. The meeting on Tuesday wasn't hostile, but I don't think the applicant understands that an analysis of design alternatives is going to be required, and some concessions are going to have to made so that the appropriate balance is struck between reasonable development and protection of biological resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I have a question for you. This relates to this project, but kind of in general. I want to get your thought. Because you will often go to the reasonable design argument.
I know it's the hard one.
Well, I always try to move away from the reasonable design argument. So let's put this on the table right now. Would you agree with me that the environmental argument is the easier argument, the stronger argument upon which to stand?
I would agree.
Okay. In this instance, on this agenda item today, I'm not even looking at the reasonable design issue, although if the applicant's in the room, and I'll find that out in a minute, I would advise the applicant to work with the community on the reasonable design argument if it can be worked out, because it's always nice to dispose of it if you can. But I'm concerned about the environmental issues that you've raised. I was concerned about them on December 18th, but hearing from the Bureau already on the addendum to the M&D and the environmental document to begin with, I think raises a red flag. But you answered my question. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hall? Okay, thank you. So we have some speaker cards. Is the applicant here? Okay. Did you put in a speaker card? Okay. So what I'm going to do is go through the speaker cards that we have from the community, because I'm going to put a time limit on them because we have already had a public hearing, and then we will hear from you afterwards, and then go from there. So if I call your name and you are the applicant, let me know, and I'm going to hold you until after we've heard from the public.
Mr. President, just for clarification, would you like to give an aggregate total for all public speakers this morning, or a 1-minute time limit, or how would you like to conduct the speaker cards?
What's that?
How would you like to time the speaker cards?
That's what I'm about to tell you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I was looking to see what I've got here. Yeah. So because we have had a public hearing on this already on December 18th, and due to the number of cards and the number of cards we have on agenda item number 1 this morning, I'm going to call you up in groups of 3 on the public comment cards. And this morning, the limit on the time for Dr. Campos is going to be 1 minute per speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. So we will start with Linda Whitford, and then we have Elizabeth, it appears to be Dennis, and then Christopher Brown. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Linda Whitford. We met with the developer, Jordan Shalom, on Monday for a couple of hours. Mr. Shalom presented himself as someone who cares very much about neighbors and is very willing to work with them. He gave every indication he would continue negotiations with us. At the end of our meeting, Attorney Jamie Hull asked Mr. Shalom if he would therefore join us in requesting a further continuance in order to allow for further time for negotiations. Mr. Shalom said he would need to consult with his father and legal counsel. Mr. Hull requested he respond to us by close of business Wednesday with his answer. I understand Mr. Hull finally heard from Danny Shalom, Jordan's father, on Thursday, refusing to participate in further discussion or join us in request for more time to negotiate. At our meeting with Jordan Shalom, to convince us of his goodwill and past responsibility and willingness to work with neighbors, he referred us to speak with neighbors of a previous development site on Kimridge, Upper Coldwater Canyon. As it happens, I know residents on those streets. I contacted them and was given a very different picture of Mr. Shalom and his treatment of neighbors' concerns.
1 minute.
In short, neighbors banded together and went to the MDRB to oppose the project, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal assistance,
Thank you,
and
ma'am.
after much angst, apparently came to an agreement. I raise this because it goes to
Thank
his
you, ma'am.
credibility.
Ms. Dennis?
I'm Elizabeth St. Dennis.
Oh, St. Dennis, okay. Couldn't read that middle part.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't like public speaking, but Nichols Canyon is very important to me. I love my canyon. It is a beautiful place, as the attorney mentioned. The preservation of its character, the trees and creek and wildlife are important to everyone who lives there. Cutting down the trees will adversely affect the canyon and the wildlife and the creek. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Good morning. I'm a resident of the 2200 block of Nichols Canyon Road, and I'm very concerned about the ongoing degradation of our environmentally sensitive canyon. Our spring-fed stream supports a wide range of wildlife, including deer, coyotes, exuberant frogs, and the occasional bobcat. At the same time, the assault on existing trees, collateral damage, and the constant construction of homes in the Hollywood Hills is quite difficult to watch. The ecosystem supported by the creek's running water, in concert with the diverse vegetation in the canyon itself, cannot be regenerated quickly by the simple planting of replacement saplings following home site construction. It would be my sincere hope that careful consideration is given to possible design alternatives for the house and bridge over the stream before these mature trees are removed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we go back to our public speakers, ma'am, we have a group of students with us today. Would you come up and just let us know where they're from, if you don't mind? Hey, everybody. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having us. This is our wonderful group of scholars from LA Promise Charter High School number 1. We're in South Los Angeles on 52nd and Western. We're a new charter school. This is our first year, and this is our 9th grade class here.
All 9th grade class. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
For having us.
Well, thanks for being here, ladies and gentlemen. So we are the Board of Public Works, obviously. We sit every Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning for public hearings. We're the general managers of the Department of Public Works, which is the third largest department in the city. The infrastructure department, if you will. We oversee sanitation, street services, the Bureau of Engineering, the Bureau of Street Lighting, and the Bureau of Contract Administration, dealing with many of our public works contracts. So you encounter the Department of Public Works every day in your lives when you step out of your home and step onto a sidewalk or into the public right-of-way through a road or any way like that. And we all come from very different parts of the city and different walks of life and different backgrounds. And we're appointed by the mayor of Los Angeles and confirmed by the city council. And what you walked into literally the middle of a public hearing on a tree removal proposal for a development for a home, and there are members of the public that are here to speak either for it or against it, and there are some issues that relate to the matter, including environmental issues and issues regarding the design of the building itself that have to meet with our city rules. So welcome to your city hall, and we hope you have a great day here today, seeing your government in action. And maybe one day you all will. We always want all of you to consider public service. And anybody want to say anything else, Commissioner Davis?
Mr. President, I think you've said it all. I think that through coming here and through your observations today, what you're able to see, we hope that you might be inspired to know that you can do the same thing that is being done here today in terms of resolving problems and improving the conditions of our city. And as President James said, it's called public service. So we look forward to, in the future, many of you either being on this side of the hall, being appointed by the mayor as commissioners of public works, or on the other side of the hall as city council members. So it's a pleasure for us to see you here today, and we always know that education is truly the key to success. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. So we'll go back to our to our public speakers. We'll start with Michael Hacker. Then we have Michael, the final initial P, and then we have Mary, final initial M. Mr. Hacker? Good morning, sir.
Hello, thank you. I was raised in Nichols Canyon, have been a resident there for most of 60 years. I know the habitat intimately and am well aware of the importance of the site at 2251 Nichols Canyon to the stream and surrounding area. The trees in question harbor numerous native and migrating bird species, including but not limited to Nuttall's woodpecker, downy woodpecker, Bullock's oriole, California quail, American robin, northern mockingbird, mourning dove, western scrub jay, Cooper's hawk, red-tailed hawk, great horned owl, dark-eyed junco, brown towhee, spotted towhee, as well as numerous finch and sparrow varieties. I've seen all of these bird species on countless occasions in the area immediately surrounding the 2251 property. Removal of any large trees would impact the wildlife significantly. The proposed development will erode vegetation on the banks, and any removal of trees will lessen the shade canopy over the stream, which will have a significant and detrimental impact on native wildlife. So hopefully we can protect the native trees and protect the quality of life in Nichols Canyon. Thank you.
Thank you.
I lived next to 2251 for 27 years. We bought in December of 1991, and then we were amazed the following March to be greeted by a chorus of croaking frogs that came up from the stream. That announces spring for us every year. They depend on those trees. They depend on the environment. The wildlife depends on the water from that stream for their needs. I can only ask, I thank you for your time here today. I just ask for your help to help the applicant realize what he is doing to the environment. These are single cases that I think are ruled on in a very specific way, but I think overall, generally, what is happening here in terms of the ecology of Los Angeles is at risk, and I hope we can have your help. It's very important to us that live there. Thank you.
Thank you. And adding to the line so we can keep it going will be Larry McQueen next after Mary M, and then Julie and last initial K. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello. I have lived in Nichols Canyon for 59 years on property which has a natural spring-fed stream and with 2 native western sycamore trees. The native trees, the spring-fed stream, and our natural animal habitat is what makes Nichols Canyon a unique corridor in Los Angeles. These assets are being threatened suddenly by developers like never before. Our local wildlife of frog, fowl, fox, coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, possum, raccoons, skunk, and deer depend on the few open spaces and on our mature blanket of native trees and our natural spring-fed stream. I hope to see the developer take a more careful consideration for the house and bridge to be developed so as not to have a negative environmental impact on our native trees, stream, and animals at the location of 2251 Nichols.
Thank you. Good morning. You, Mr. McQueen?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I love Los Angeles, but I think there's something going on in the back of my head, which I think is going on in a lot of people's heads, is maybe we're going too fast. Maybe we're building too big. Maybe there's too much. I mean, and we're forgetting, what makes Los Angeles Los Angeles. This is happening in Nichols Canyon also. I lived there 28 years. And in the last 7 years, there's a new type of development that's going on. It's by contractors that have no intention of living there, but they're building biggest house they can build on a lot so that they can make the biggest profit. And I understand that, but that doesn't take into account the environment. A property next to us completely leveled the entire ground, cut back to our property line, and of course our hillside fell. This property has the same similar thing, but behind the property that's being cut down is the only access road to the property to the houses above. If that collapses, the
1 minute.
property collapses. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. After Julie Kay, then we have Dr. Tom Williams and then Lisa Smith. Hi.
Hi, I'm a resident of Nichols Canyon for over 15 years. I'm also the current president of the Nichols Canyon Neighborhood Association and deeply care about the neighborhood, environment, people, and wildlife that live in our canyon and its surrounding neighborhoods. Since being made aware of the proposed development on 2251, I've joined with my neighbors in coming together on several occasions to discuss their extreme concerns and adverse effects on the current design of the project will have as proposed by the developer. In my opinion, it's not enough thought that has been given to the overall design, both house and bridge, to protect the native trees, creek, and wildlife. Sadly, I feel the oversight will extend to the neighborhood properties. The pristine trees, land, and creek that serve as homes to native tree frogs, deers, coyotes, raccoons, opossums, and numerous birds deserve to be protected. The removal of the proposed trees will not only endanger their habitat, it will further destroy the ecosystem built over decades. I understand there will be new trees planted as per city requirements, but it will take years for them to reach maturity. Please protect them now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Williams?
Good morning. Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club Water Committee and others. And why am I interested in West LA? I come from El Sereno. However, we're trying to protect the black walnut. And whenever I see a black walnut up for removal, I'm quite concerned. This one's even more important because the bay and the sycamore usually don't occur with the black walnut. They require a lot more water. And from what I've seen of the MND, the hydrology, groundwater, and the movement of groundwater for the trees is not well developed and can be subject to review. So we're quite interested in how these trees work together and how the removal of them and the barriers of retaining walls and gravel packs will drain the soil so that other
1 minute.
bays and such will not be able to
Thank you,
survive.
Dr. Williams.
Inadequate, incomplete.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, are you related at all, any connection, I should say, to the applicant? Yeah, that's why I asked. So, yeah. So what I'd like to do, the applicant can make the choice. I've got 3 cards that are associated with the applicant. I've got Jordan Shalom, Daniel Shalom, and Lisa Smith, as well as Tyler Barnes. So I've got 4 cards. It looked like to me, sir, that you all might have come in the middle of our hearing. Were you here the whole time to hear Mr. Tyson? Okay, so you heard Mr. Tyson indicate that the Bureau of Street Services is going to need to go back to the planning department regarding Mr. Tyson? Yes, the hydrology report? Yeah, study. So that's going to force a continuance by our board. But if you want to be heard on that, you can be heard on that.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Shame that the kids are going to leave right now before we're going to start talking, but...
Well, they're on a schedule.
I wish you all the best. So as you see, I just handed Mr. Campos our hydrology report, as well as all of the notifications we've gotten from the appropriate state agencies regarding water resources, fish and wildlife, and also a notice from the Army Corps of Engineers. So
it's all one pack.
With that in mind, I'd like to address what the president spoke to earlier regarding the fact that attacking this home on the grounds of it not being a reasonable development is facetious, in my opinion. As the residents have noted, the street has seen increased construction sizes as the economy's gotten better and time has moved forward, and our house doesn't fall out of line with those houses that have been built in those last 7 or 8 years. And I can provide a list of comparisons
because they do exist all along Nichols Canyon. So our house is not out of the ordinary, and with some of the notes that we've given you today, you can see that we have gone to extraordinary lengths to file hydrology reports, to check with the state resource boards, and put forward our best foot to make sure that we do protect the environment in this home. Much to, I guess, the chagrin of our opponents today, we're not here to destroy the environment. We want to build a house that shows and encapsulates the beauty of Nichols Canyon, as they've spoken to earlier. This is my father, who's the contractor of the project. He's been a contractor for 30 years. We've done a lot of hillside work, and we've done work with this committee and urban forestry before, and our track record speaks to the fact that we paid our bonds, we did plant all of the trees asked of us, and those trees are thriving today, and we're proud of that.
Daniel Shalom, I am the applicant.
Thank you, sir.
I am not as slick a speaker as Mr. Hall. I'm not as good looking as my son, but I do know how to build hillside. And the ambushing of Mr. Hall, which is the attorney that is talking to all our neighbors, it's funny because it came at 8:30 last night with an email saying, let's redesign this thing. Does any one of you answers emails at 8:30 at night saying, let's redesign? Our project has been 3.5 years in the making. It was designed around a hill which is extremely difficult to build. Hydrology is one of the items that we had to handle, and there is a creek of water that is going right next to us, and that was the beauty of this property. I am one of the cyclists. I am on that hill now for the last 7 years. I am one of the ones that goes up and found the beauty in this property. That ravine is not going away. That ravine would still provide water for the fish, for the animals that are in the neighborhood. We are merely going across from it. Mr. Hall, we've taken few steps to try to preserve those trees, and one of them was to allow a tree to be built in the bridge that we're proposing. The Board of Public Works did not like that. They did not like a tree coming through a bridge. We had to erase that thought and go away from this. If you look at the lot, and I have here a survey, our mountain is extremely steep here. Steep portion of the hill means it's very steep. Mr. Hall, and I'm sure that he's an excellent attorney, I don't know how much of architectural he's done before. That area cannot handle a bridge. It cannot handle construction through the worst part of the lot. And I'm sure, and I know this is not the part of the argument or the discussion today as to the design of the house. We're merely talking about the trees. In a few minutes, Ms. Lisa Smith, which is the only licensed arborist in this city, will come and talk in front of us and tell us the condition of those trees. We try to work around them, but there is flaws with those trees. Some of them are dying. We are planting 5 times as many trees as there are here currently. Hydrology has been submitted and approved by the Board of Public Works. So, Mr. Hall, if you like, or any of the
Sir,
Sir,
neighbors.
when you say the Board of Public Works, you mean us?
No, not the board.
Yeah,
Correct, but
yeah. So,
not the board, but part of Public Work reviews the hydrology, and hydrology talks about the flow of water, and we had to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers, we had to deal with the Coastal Commission. All that process that took 2 years has been approved. Those documents and the red flag that you raised should be removed. We have those approved. You don't have. We'll submit the plans to you and the approvals.
It's correct, the Board of Engineers that we had to run it through.
it was the Bureau of Engineering, but
Bureau of Engineering, but I thought it's part of Public Work.
yeah, it is.
We're at the same
It is.
count.
Go ahead.
Just in summation, before we let our arborist and our biologist speak about the property and the work that we're going to do.
If you don't mind, if you can speak into the mic, it's for the record. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So before we let our arborist and biologist speak about our efforts to maintain and protect the wildlife on the property, I'd just like to point to this again. As you can see here, the the area that Mr. Hall has told us to consider redevelopment and redesign in is situated closer to the stream at the steepest part of the hillside. And as my father spoke to earlier, that would require a substantial more amount of work and pose a significantly greater risk to the environment. So I'd just like that to be on the record before we get asked again to redesign our house. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys, and we'll leave all of the documents here that you'd like.
Thank you.
Submitted and approved by
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, at this point, I'm interested in hearing your summary of whether the trees, the subject trees, are diseased or not. And keep in mind, I am going to direct the Bureau of Street Services to confirm anything that you say. We always, no disrespect to your profession.
Not at all.
We have experts that come in and say they're sick, and we have experts that come in and say that, not on this, but in prior examples. I'm an old trial lawyer. We've used experts to say red and experts to say blue. So,
Correct.
So go ahead. Let us know your assessment. And then
Well-
we're going to have Street Services confirm either way, but go ahead.
Yes. I also sent them a photo summary showing all the photos of the trees and the infestation, where you can actually see the wet marks on the bark where they are bleeding from the strike holes. So this insect called Polyphagus shothole borer, which you probably have heard about in the news, is affecting hundreds of species of trees in Southern California, and sycamore, unfortunately, is its primary host. And it's a host that it can rebreed in. So some species it just attacks, and then others are called the host. There are about 50 host species. And I have extensive experience. I work directly with Dr. Akif Escalin with the University of California, Riverside, who is the lead researcher in the nation on this bug. So he and I work in conjunction together. So I have extensive experience on this unfortunate bug. So we just went back out there to see what the condition is, because it's been moving westerly from kind of the 210 corridor area across Los Feliz and now into the Hollywood, all the way to the 405.
Right, and I wanted you to talk about the trees that are the subject of this, and you're telling me about the 405.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. So essentially, yes, the 3 sycamore trees that are located on the property do have infestation and significant strike marks, which you could see all throughout the tree. So unfortunately right now there are no treatments that are 100%. Some people do have some treatments that have to be applied every 2 months to 3 months, and very costly, but there are no guarantees. Places like the Huntington Gardens and Disneyland are not treating. They're just letting the trees go through their natural decline and die and remove them as necessary. So that's the story on those.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Smith before we move to Mr. Barnes? Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Just so you all know, while we're closing public comment on this at the end of today's hearing, we may have some subsequent questions after we get a legal opinion from our environmental unit at the city attorney's office that will not be shared with the public, but will be shared with the Board of Public Works regarding the environmental challenges to the project. Mr. Barnes, go ahead. So that may result in an additional question for you in the future, Ms. Smith. Go ahead.
Thank you, Board. Tyler Barnes with Envicom Corporation. We helped out Mr. Diani's team, or the Nichols Canyon team, in response to CDFW's recommendations for additional technical documents. So we prepared a biological assessment, or an inventory, really, not necessarily an impact analysis, as well as a preliminary CDFW ACOE jurisdictional delineation. As part of the biological assessment, the impact discussion was left to the city to complete. However, as part of the technical report that was provided to the city, there's a discussion about the wildlife movement through the area, as well as the documents that were reviewed at the time in determination of whether or not the corridor or the wildlife connectivity could be an issue. And it was noted that, yes, there's wildlife connectivity in the area, however, the project site itself doesn't necessarily create a bottleneck or a constraint to wildlife movement. Specifically, the development of the bridge itself free spans the creek. And so we know that given the perennial creek is there, that wildlife will continue to move through the area. In addition, in May 2017, the department here was able to provide the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy's map of basically the habitat linkages, right? And so that area being established, I think it was Habitat Block 44, was came to light after the fact. And granted, now the city's ordinances and measures for daytime and nighttime noise and light would apply to any given project in the area. And so based on that, it is my belief that there's still less than significant impact. Granted that there's mitigation that includes compliance with ordinances, best management practices during construction to fence off the creek and make sure everything's done. And those were noted in the mitigated neg deck under mitigation measure 410, 460, 470, and 480. So just want to explain that the documentation for the wildlife as well as the native and local residents was provided. It's a part of the attachment to the MND. And so if there's any additional questions, I can answer those. But the information was made available and made public.
Okay. Thank you. I would only, sorry to inconvenience you, but it is possible that we may have some questions for you in a future hearing whenever it's set.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Barnes? Thank you, sir. Mr. Jordan, our city attorney. There was a reference to the width of the street in a zoning administrator determination. I want you to address that for us in a moment, but the first thing I'm going to want to request is that Mr. Shu and his team in our environmental unit, I've got competing documents that I'm going to need resolution on from the city attorney's office, or at least analysis for our board to be able to review. We've got the environmental challenge from Mr. Hall, and we've got the documents that have been submitted by the applicant that have been through the Bureau of Engineering and the Department of Planning with questions from the Bureau of Street Services. Given that, I'm going to want the update from, or the review from Mr. Shu's Environmental Division. But a question that seems to have surfaced is this zoning administrator issue. Your thoughts on that?
I believe what Mr. Hall was referring to is a requirement that is in the hillside area, a requirement that applies to hillside development projects where there would be a 20-foot frontage at the property along with, that's one requirement, along with a 20-foot continuous paved roadway requirement from the location of the property to the nearest road. It's not uncommon for one or both of those requirements to be subject to a zoning administrator determination if it's decided that those requirements need not be complied with. So Mr. Hall has raised the issue. I don't know, I haven't seen any information other than what he provided. So it may be advisable to ask Bureau of Street Services to check with the Planning Department and the Bureau of Engineering to make sure that that requirement isn't going to apply here. Because if there is going to be a zoning administrator determination needed for this project, that is a discretionary approval that really would need to be considered in the overall CEQA analysis of the project.
You don't have to interrupt. He's done. You can give us a 30-second response on that.
The City of Los Angeles has a method of checking street width online. It's called ZIMAS.
Yeah, we're familiar with it.
ZIMAS shows us that the streets are compatible. We took a survey out there and measured the entire 2.5 miles from Hollywood up to the property. Those plans are here. It was from the
Understood. Got it.
There are two places where the street is not 20 feet, and we are applying and obtaining the permit in the next day or two to fix that problem.
Yeah. So understood.
It will be 20 feet. We will comply.
Fair enough. Mr. Hall, are you challenging that?
That I did submit pictures that I personally took attached, and then
you did that on December 18th.
Right, and then also Navigate LA, which is the online system. it's not perfect and there's been acknowledged error. So I would ask that if there's any further analysis, there is a mechanism to have actually city staff go out there and measure it themselves.
Got it. So we'll get to the bottom of that. So we're going to add it to our list, Mr. Tyson. You got to deal with planning on the hydrology report, which according to the applicants is here. So you'll confirm that to your satisfaction. We'll request that you resolve this zoning issue on the width of the street before our next hearing. And Mr. Jordan will have our legal opinion that will not be public, that will be distributed to the Board of Public Works prior to the hearing. And then we'll have a continued hearing. Commissioner Repenning.
Tim, I have a clarification question for you. Our report says that in the recital, Ms. Smith's report indicates the property contains 11 native protected trees. I was looking at the report and I thought I counted 14. How many protected trees are on the property currently?
And that's more report than we have there. We have, thought it was 11 total. Let me see.
Are you?
11 native protected trees on the property.
All right, I'm just looking at this little. Yes, please.
Oh, 3 off-site. The OS means off-site. That means next door. And the most important trees on any project are the trees that you don't own. So all off-site trees that may be bordering the property are always included in the report so we can prove that they're not damaging anyone else's trees.
During construction. Okay, so we're talking about 11 trees on this site and 7 are proposed for removal.
That is correct.
Okay, and the reason, I mean, as we look at, the ecosystem that exists and, really what is a reasonable impact for a home on that ecosystem, these are the things that I think about, so thank you.
Absolutely, and the sycamores with the hits of the polyphagus shothole borer may change the actual condition of the trees per the original report that states they're in fair condition and health. And if they've been hit by shothole borer, then the sycamores would not be considered that any longer.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Tim, I wanted to ask the applicant testified a few minutes ago that there was a plan to accommodate one of the trees and that the Bureau, I guess, said that plan did not work. I guess he had some way in which the tree could be in front of the house with some development around the tree, and I guess we declared that could not occur. So that of the 11 trees, one of them allegedly he proposed to save, and that we said that was not appropriate. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything about that. I was speaking with Lisa, and she had proposed one of the bridge actually be moved.
Right.
But that would go back to building and safety, not something that we would determine.
That would be building and safety. All right,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Anything further? Okay. Mr. Jordan, how much time does Mr. Shu's unit need? I know they're busy, and I know that I'm asking you to step into his shoes here, which is not really fair to him.
Yeah, no, it's really hard to say.
Well, let's do this. Why don't we put it on 30 days, and then if he needs either more or less time, we can then let the parties know through Dr. Campos.
Absolutely. Another issue I just want to raise for the record that may bear looking at. Mr. Hall, in addition to raising the issue concerning the 20-foot continuous roadway, which should something be easily verified. I mean, Bureau of Engineering can do that. Also raised an issue concerning some of the retaining walls on the property.
Yes.
And whether or not they will require additional variances to do the retaining walls, so
Yeah.
we can take a look at that as well, although that may require sort of interacting with the Building and Safety Department because it's really under their purview. So I'm putting it out there as another issue that will need to be looked at.
Okay.
Because it was raised by Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Thank you. And just in general comment before we get to the date of the continuance, I've always considered, and I believe I can speak for my colleagues on this, these hearings take a while. We have another hearing coming up that's going to take a while. Our goal here is to avoid the courts and to avoid litigation and to get resolution of projects to as much satisfaction of all parties as possible. And that's rarely an easy feat, but we appreciate everyone's participation in the process. And that remains our goal on this project as well. So yes, it's cumbersome and Byzantine, but these are complicated issues, and it's a large, complicated city. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. Dr. Campos, 30 days from today is the 19th. I think we're at a holiday right around the 19th.
So that would put you on Wednesday, February 21st.
Wednesday,
would be the
February
30th day.
21st. Is Monday a holiday? Is that
Monday is a
President's
holiday
Day?
on the 19th, yes.
Let's do Friday, the
February 23rd.
Yes. And just so that all the parties know, if we get word back from the city attorney's office that they don't need that much time, we will, Dr. Campos, you and Mr. Hall knows how to get a hold of him. I'm assuming the applicants know how to get a hold of Dr. Campos. If not, he'll give you his information. And if it can go earlier, we'll let you know that as well. Okay? Thank you all for your work and your patience. So that'll be the order on agenda item number 3. Let's go ahead and take general public comment. We have 2 cards on general public comment before we take the time on agenda item number 1. Dr. Williams, you have a card in on general public comment.
Mr. President, before we move on to item number 1, are we closing public comments for item 3?
What?
Item 3, are we closing the public comments?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And just, Mr. Hall, just so we're clear, we've had the public comment on, we've had 2 sessions now on agenda item number 3, so the subsequent hearing will be on the substantive issues without general public comment. All right? Thank you. Dr. Williams.
I get 2 minutes?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club Water Committee, Citizens Coalition for a Safe Community. We have submitted a PRA request regarding curb cuts and walnut trees. I love walnut trees. I have 6 on my property right now, all from seedlings. So we're quite concerned regarding curb cuts. But on the positive side, thank you, Street Services, for paving the bicycle lane and the curb lane along Mission Road. It's very good now. We're trying now to find out what's going to happen at Setchell and Workman for curb cuts for ADA compliance. We were told that they're in the list, but we can't find where the list is and when these are going to be undertaken and what's going to be undertaken. Curb cuts in 90032 zip code are incomplete in several intersections, at least 6 intersections. You might say they have 3 out of 4 or 5 out of 6. And there are complications with the opposite side where it's a sign, it's a striped crosswalk, but it ends against a blank curb with a utility box behind it or a tree or no cement from the curb to the sidewalk. So we're quite concerned regarding curb cuts. Another one related to that is Bavan. And how does the public access Bavan without an ID number? I have an ID number from 3 years ago, but I cannot access Bavan because it requires a federal
2 minutes.
requirement. Yeah. Thank you.
And
John Paul Dreyer? Aye. Thank you for your patience.
I'm John Paul Dreyer. I live in Silver Lake. I'm a retired LAUSD teacher after 30 years of service. And I passed out to my students these flyers that you can call 311 with your parents' permission for problems in the neighborhood or to improve public work issues in the neighborhood. And then I learned about your 311 app. And so since I've been retired, I've had more time to use this. And I want to say, kudos for the turnaround on when I take a picture of a pothole and the GPS tracking or graffiti, it is removed in our Silver Lake neighborhood in 1 week. However, not everything takes a week. And so I'm hoping you can better communicate with, because I know you have different departments to better coordinate, and then also with the public, maybe on 311, like if it's not going to be solved in a week, about approximately how long will it take? Where are you on the waiting list? Because different things have different lengths of lines. So it would be very appreciative if you could align the communication better, and also if it's going to take longer for something, who do we need to talk to find more funding? With the Trump administration limits to our property taxes and state income taxes and sales taxes at $10,000, we might want to consider foundations for charitable foundations for each department of our city, or even the school district, to fund public works or safe passages to school for children. And then the money, we can have a separate funding source if there's a limited funds for fixing sidewalks or curbs, especially in Silver Lake or throughout the city. And for the students who I've taught throughout our district and the city, they need a safe place designated to go and have safe sidewalks that are repaired quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your use and advocacy of 311. It only gets better when people educate other people about it and spread the word. We appreciate it. So that'll close general public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. You are Lydia. I have your card. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you honored to be here. I'm speaking before you as a relative to Gloria Arianas, as she has adopted me as her sister Tongva relative. And taking note in the previous cases, I'm going to speak generally to what's happening right now in the critical affirmation of LEAP, our manifesto to create Los Angeles as a 2025 carbon-free city. And that in itself will meet its own struggles. And so we're addicted to oil, and that's all there is to it. Looking to our relatives, the birds, the trees, why are we even counting them? Any removal or dismissal, if it's not labeled as far as ill for the trees or sick or determined that we need to remove it safely, that's what we should be doing. It hurts my heart to hear these conversations of mitigating and trying to be reasonable about our living relatives, especially hummingbirds. Right now, I have a flock of birds from the Playa Vista that have been displaced and now relocating in our neighborhood in Venice. And it's not their home. It's not. I make it as much fresh water. I try to make accessible water for them every day. But the responsibility is all of ours. It's not just one simple bowl. The other issue is the accumulative impact on CEQA. In our entire Southern California, let alone Los Angeles, let alone 4 directions in Los Angeles, no one here is making sure that Tataviam, Shumash, or Ho Chi Minh, or Tongva are in these conversations. We are relatives to this land and the water, knowing what's best in the balance for all of us. We are not sustaining life for our relatives, the winged, the finned, or the creepy crawlers. So we have to look to being better relatives in 2018. Please support a CEQA in Venice, on the west side, in all 4 directions, and connect us, because that right here and now is the truth of these matters for all of our children, for 7 generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So that will close general public comment. Let's go to agenda item number 1, Council Districts 11 and 15, Bureau of Engineering, appeal of local coastal development permit number 17-07, Los Angeles Beach Access Project, recommending that the board deny the appeals and approve issuance of local coastal development permit number 17-07. So we have a number of speaker cards on the item, and some of them are appellants, and some of them are not. So what I would like to do is we'll start with the Bureau of Engineering, Mr. Mundy. Mr. Jordan, you were excited about something?
No, I just wanted to remind the commission that this may be a long item.
Yes,
so if
you're doing me a favor.
You want to dismiss our bureau representative.
And here I am accosting you for jumping out of your seat.
Yes. You all owe me now.
Yes. Good point. Other than the Bureau of Engineering, and they are covered here today, for our bureau representatives from other bureaus, this is going to be an interesting discussion if you'd like to stay, but I realize you have a lot to do today, so you are excused if you would like to be so excused this morning. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Jordan. Back where I was, let's start with Mr. Mundy, and then we have the appellants in response, and then we have set the table for hearing from the other comment cards. Mr. Mundy, do you need, about 10 minutes?
I'm hoping to complete in less than 10 minutes, but
okay.
Approximately 10
Go
minutes.
ahead, sir.
Good morning. My name is Norman Mundy. I'm an environmental supervisor with the Bureau of Engineering. And as Commissioner James mentioned, I'd like to give a short presentation on the item before you, and then following my presentation, call up a representative of the applicant who would like to make a short statement. Before you today...
Representative from
the applicant from Department of Recreation and Parks.
Go ahead.
Before you today is consideration of 8 appeals of Local Coastal Development Permit 1707. This permit was approved by the city engineer, and the Board of Public Works has jurisdiction to hear and decide appeals of this type of coastal development permit. The applicant for the coastal development permit is the Department of Recreation and Parks, which operates city beaches. The Bureau of Engineering is responsible for evaluating the permit application, and the coastal permit at issue involves a section of the municipal code that relates to closure of beaches in Los Angeles. I'd like to start with a brief description of the background and history relating to this item, and then following that, I'd like to discuss the requirements of the Coastal Act and the details of Coastal Development Permit 1707. First of all, for the section of the municipal code that's at issue here, Municipal Code Section 6344B14B closes the beaches in the city of Los Angeles during the nighttime between the hours of midnight, 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. The public may access beaches and use these beaches anytime from 5 a.m. to the closure at midnight. For convenience, I will refer to Section 6344B14B of the Municipal Code as the Nighttime Beach Closure Provision. The Nighttime Beach Closure Provision does allow limited access to beaches even during the period of midnight to 5 a.m. Beach access during these hours is available in 2 ways. First, the supervising employee at the beach may allow access during the midnight to 5 a.m. period for special events such as grunion runs. Secondly, persons wishing to use a city beach between midnight and 5 a.m. may apply to the Department of Recreation and Parks for a special use permit. An application for a special use permit would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by the Department of Rec and Parks. The nighttime beach closure provisions apply to the following city beaches, moving geographically from north to south: Will Rogers State Beach, Venice Beach, Dockweiler Beach, Wilders Edition Park, and Outer Cabrillo Beach. So to summarize, the nighttime beach closure provisions of the municipal code close city beaches between midnight and 5 a.m., but do allow limited access during the closure period for special events and through special use permits. Due to public safety concerns, the city has regulated beach access in some manner since the 1930s. The current nighttime beach closure provision was enacted by the City Council as a public safety measure in 1989. Thus, the midnight to 5 a.m. beach closure has been in effect for almost 30 years. An examination of legislative history reveals that the nighttime beach closure provision of the municipal code has three main purposes. First, to limit the risk to public safety. Second, to help prevent crime and vandalism to public structures. And third, to prevent damage to natural resources and habitat. Thus, the nighttime beach closure provision is a long-standing measure intended to protect public safety. Let's turn now to the requirements of the Coastal Act. As mentioned earlier, the Department of Recreation and Parks submitted an application to the Bureau of Engineering for a coastal development permit.
And the Coastal Act, Mr. Mundy, is state law.
The Coastal Act is state law passed in 1976.
Go ahead.
The Bureau of Engineering, acting through the city engineer, evaluates permit applications based on the requirements of the statewide Coastal Act. And the city engineer has the authority to approve coastal development permits for projects in the public right-of-way, such as the municipal ordinance under discussion here, which does affect the public right-of-way. The permits approved by the city engineer are often referred to as local permits. And your board hears and decides appeals of these local coastal development permits. The Coastal Act regulates in a statewide manner development in coastal areas of California. The key goals of the Coastal Act are providing public access to beaches and protecting natural resources. Applications for local coastal development permits must be evaluated for consistency with the provisions of the Coastal Act, including those provisions that relate to public access and to beaches. So now we can talk about the intersection of the Coastal Act with the section of the municipal code that we're talking about. In September of 2017, the Department of Recreation and Parks, which operates most beaches within the city of Los Angeles, applied to the Bureau of Engineering for a local coastal development permit to allow the department to continue to implement the nighttime beach closure provisions of the municipal code. So the permit would allow Rec and Parks to continue to implement the section of the municipal code that's been on the books for 30 years. The Bureau of Engineering evaluated the permit application in accordance with Coastal Act regulations. A hearing was held to receive public comments on October 5th, 2017. Public notification of the hearing through both posting and U.S. mail was consistent with the requirements of the Coastal Act. After consideration of all comments received, BOE staff prepared a final staff report on the permit application. The staff report made the findings that are required for issuance of a coastal development permit. These findings are discussed in the staff report and as well as in the board report for this item. On November 9th, 2017, the city engineer issued a notice of decision approving Coastal Development Permit 1707. The Bureau of Engineering has received 8 appeals of the decision to approve the permit. These appeals are the item before the board today. The central claim made by appellants is that the nighttime beach closure provision is not in conformity with the Coastal Act's public access policies. The Coastal Act does encourage public access to beaches. However, the access requirement of the Coastal Act is not absolute. Section 30210 of the Coastal Act states that beach access can be limited in a manner, quote, consistent with public safety needs and the need to protect rights of private property owners. Secondly, Section 30212 of the Act provides that access shall be provided, quote, except where it is inconsistent with public safety or the protection of fragile coastal resources. So the Coastal Act public access requirements allow a balance between the value of providing access and the need to protect public safety and resources. The city engineer's decision to approve CDP 1707 was based on a determination that the nighttime beach closure provisions do achieve an acceptable balance between access and public safety. Further, the access restrictions of the nighttime beach closure provisions are limited in that they only apply during the 5-hour period from midnight to 5 a.m. and even during that 5-hour window, access to the beach is available via special use permit. Additionally, Coastal Development Permit 1707 includes 2 special conditions that have been added that the applicant, Recon Parks, must comply with. The first special condition limits the term of the Coastal Development Permit to 5 years and requires the applicant to collect relevant data on crime and public safety in beach areas during that 5-year lifetime of the permit. After 5 years, that data will provide a factual basis that the city engineer can use to determine if nighttime beach closure provisions are still appropriate and still consistent with the Coastal Act.
Those conditions or requests?
These are conditions, they're requirements.
Got it.
Shall. The second special condition requires the applicant to post signs at beaches that list beach hours and that notify the public that access to beach areas is available via special use permit. Based on the above, the city engineer determined that Section 6344B14B is intended to protect public safety, and the access limitations it includes are sufficiently limited to conform to Coastal Act requirements. In conclusion, staff recommends that the board find that the city engineer did not err in approving CDP 1707. Second, deny the appeals. And third, approve Coastal Development Permit 1707 as conditioned. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. At this point, I'd like to introduce Kathy Santo Domingo from Department of Recreation and Parks, who is the applicant for this permit, to make a brief statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mundy. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kathy Santo Domingo, Superintendent, Planning, Construction, and Maintenance with the Department of Recreation and Parks. Recreation and Parks concurs with Bureau of Engineering's findings with regards to this coastal development application. We strongly feel that maintaining the hours of closure, midnight to 5 a.m., is for public safety, health and safety. With me this morning as well are representatives from our actual boots on the ground folks. So our Superintendent of Venice Beach, Robert Davis, is here, as well as LAPD Officer Captain Seltzer, should you have any specific questions for the site.
Thank you. We'll start with Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. Norman, I just want to comment. Thank you for the presentation. It's very clear, and I appreciate the work that our environmental unit, Maria, and everybody has done on this important issue. I want to ask a question, Kathy. Thank you for your presence as well. Was there a reason why you had to apply for the coastal permit because it lapsed, or you had to renew? Just brief me.
That's part of this complicated history of this project. As I mentioned, the section of the ordinance that does close the beaches between midnight and 5 a.m. has been on the books since 1989, so just about 30 years now. Over time, the California Coastal Commission has indicated to the city that the Coastal Commission would like the city to apply for a coastal development permit for this type of ordinance. As a result, Rec and Park submitted their application this past calendar year, and that's the item that we're
I
dealing with
understand. Thank
today.
you for that review.
Can you clarify for us, for the record, assuming that the application goes through, the actual operations right now of the beach would change how?
Should the appeal be denied, the operations maintain as is. So Recreation and Parks' presence in terms of our city beaches are basically at Venice Beach. We are in control, and control is basically under a joint powers agreement with LA County for Will Rogers, Doc Weiler, and Wilder's addition, as well as the Cabrillo Outer Beach. We don't have boots on the ground presence at those particular sites. Those particular beaches are actually operated through LA County beaches and harbors. So to answer your question, in terms of operations, it would not change. It would basically maintain as is with our presence at Venice Beach.
The curfew, the hours of limited public access would be between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., same as it is now.
It would be between midnight and 5 a.m.
And currently, can people apply to hold a special event on those beaches during the restricted hours?
Correct. They would be approaching our superintendent for Venice Beach for the specific event, and there's been a number of special events in the past year that the beach has hosted.
And under the new procedure, that application process would work in the same way?
Correct. In essence, it remains the same.
If people wanted to request access during those restricted hours?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Penning. Mr. Mundy, this is, so Rec and Parks is here on an application for this permit. Is there any feeling in the building that they don't need to be?
Actually, I'll speak on behalf of Rec and Parks, and Kathy can certainly correct me if I'm mistaken here. The application that Rec and Parks submitted was done under what's called a reservation of rights, which I take to mean that their application is not does not represent a concession that a coastal development permit is legally required. So Rec and Parks is reserving the right to challenge the fact that a coastal development permit is actually legally necessary for the project. Nonetheless, they've gone ahead and submitted the application, and we're processing the application as we would any other application for a coastal development permit.
Some could say perhaps in an abundance of caution.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to, ma'am, you indicated that there was LAPD here and that the uniforms would indicate that. Sir, I thank you for coming this morning. The words that are included in the presentation that are very consistent and are public safety, and there are some issues that are more obvious than others regarding public safety, and for people that have lived in beach communities for a long time, you see some common denominators. You can Google public safety beaches at night, and you'll see lots of information quickly. But you're here. I would like for you to state on the record the public safety issues or concerns that the LAPD believes are relevant to the matter that we are hearing this morning.
Well, just for the record, my name is Captain Jim Setzer. I am the area CO for Pacific Area.
And with respect to this proposal, we certainly endorse the permit of restricting beach access between midnight and 0500 or 5 a.m. In particular, in my area, Pacific area, we oversee the beach communities of Venice Beach and Dockweiler Beach. And the sandy parts of those communities is about 7 miles and about 400 yards wide, depending upon the tide. Okay, and looking at the crime statistics over the last 4 years, since 2013, we average between Venice Beach community and Dockweiler community about 500 Part 1 crimes a year. And that's everything from grand theft auto to burglary of motor vehicles, residential burglaries, and aggravated assaults, etc. And so we see that as a significant ongoing crime problem without adding an additional 5 hours of beach access, frankly. Those two communities generate about 400 calls for service per month. And staffing-wise, for my area, that's about, we dedicate about 30 police officers that cover, they really police at 24 hours. And then that's off-season. And then during the summer months, we bump that up to about 60 officers. And so our forecast would be that if we add 5 hours of beach access, we're going to pull some of that crime out on the beach. And it's going to be an impact on not only the quality of life of the people that live there, but certainly a drain on additional resources and equipment needed to effectively and safely police the beach at nighttime, because it is pitch black out there.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Mundy, Rec and Parks, or LAPD? Thank you, sir. You might stick around if you can, in case additional questions come up. So we have, I have two appellants that are listed on the cards here. Venice Justice Committee, Peggy Lee Kennedy, and Eric, it looks like ARES or AVES, Southern California Homeless Bill of Rights Coalition. It's up to the two of you, whoever would like to go first. Ma'am, how much time would you think you need?
Less than 10 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. As the appellant, we don't put the same speaker time limits on people, but
Peggy
go
Lee
ahead.
Kennedy. I actually am a third-generation resident of Venice, although I can't afford to live there anymore. It's extremely gentrified, and mostly more affluent people own property there at this point, especially within the 100 feet of the beach area. So if you look at my paperwork, which looks like this, okay, the first page just talks about there was no public notice for the application, and I think Eric Arez is going to go over that, but I thought it was important that I give you my documentation that in fact, whether the process was done right or not, they certainly didn't post it at any point, and there were multiple people going out checking at this address that they gave us, and it never was there. And in fact, there was no public notice for the meetings either. So I don't know what you guys see as public notice, but this is approximately 14 miles of public beach that they're closing. So those are the color pictures for you. Page 6 is my second point, and that's basically two parts, because the fact is the applicant has not provided the crime data required, and the city has wrongly enacted a beach curfew prior to acquiring a coastal development permit. I assumed that they had the permit, and when I was talking to the Coastal Commission staff November 2007, I was informed there was no such thing on the books. I was shocked. So I filed a complaint at that point. And I have been working on this issue since November 2007, and that includes documenting all the tickets and the people who get the tickets. So in the city of Los Angeles staff report, page 6, and page 8, I gave you some excerpts. You know, they quite inaccurately maintain that there is, you know, evidence of consistent legislative history that is evidence for you so that, you know, they wouldn't have to do this proactively, which is mandated by the Coastal Act. And in fact, they gave you a letter, which they provided in the staff report, from 1988 from a committee that says there's concerns. Concerns are not proof of crime data. The Venice Beach crime data that was provided to you, which is at the bottom of the page, it doesn't really show you that the curfew has stopped the nuisance crime, and it doesn't show you that it will. So however you believe from the staff reports reporting, it's not evidence of crime. It's consistent numbers. It doesn't mean much. It doesn't say that there's this crime that we're going to eliminate. The Coastal Act and existing case law, specifically City of Dana Point versus California Coastal Commission, in no way allows a municipality to pretextually abate a nuisance by denying beach access in any substantial way. Page 7, which is my final point. And I think the most important point of my life's work regarding this issue. And right now, you know, I'm proud to be here. I'm really proud because there's people that didn't make it here today. Because the lifespan of an unhoused person is short. And people I care about have died that have been ticketed for this ordinance. It's really inappropriate for the city to come and tell you that this is going to stop some crime when the crime is really that they use this to remove homeless people from the beach when they don't have a place for these people to go. Just recently, the city passed an ordinance approving some FEMA-type trailers in a city lot in downtown LA, where 67 people are going to be housed. That's 5 trailers. 3 of them are for the people that are going to be housed in there. That's 67 and 3 trailers, right? So if you take 67, that's not a big chunk. And it hasn't even happened yet, but that's not a very big chunk of the 57,000 people that live homeless on any given night. How is that right? How could you morally agree with this law? You know, in 2012, the city attorney and the Council District 11 office decided that Oceanfront Walk was now going to be part of the beach curfew law. Specifically so that they could remove people off Oceanfront Walk. Now, Oceanfront Walk is actually a street. Before it was paved, it was a graded street. Because I've looked at all the historical records. It was a street that was graded, like all the dirt roads that existed in Venice. And then it had a sidewalk, which was planks. Then it was paved. And when it was deeded, it was deeded as a forever sidewalk. So, you know, people, according to the Jones settlement, which you may or may not know about, right now a homeless person can sleep on a sidewalk within certain restrictions between 9 at night and 6 in the morning, which is a pretty limited amount of sleep if you're very tired and you live on the street. So you have to have your tent up, and if you're sick, which a lot of them are, I mean, there's a lot of issues around that that's limited, but that's all they have. That's it. You know, that's really it. And there's a lot of police around it too. And then the population is varied, so there's a lot of issues. So if you live on the street, it's really hard. So, but you know those, beachfront people, that own the properties down there, and they lobbied, and Oceanfront Walk they decided that Oceanfront Walk, which is a street/sidewalk, was now the beach. And they put up a sign, and they started enforcing the curfew there. Now, this is a curfew that the Coastal Commission didn't say we would like you to do a permit for. The executive director then, Peter Douglas, who helped write the Coastal Acts, and he's now passed away, wrote a letter demanding that the city do it. Unfortunately, the city was court-ordered to do it, and recently in Valentine, is my understanding. It wasn't because they're just, but, these words that they like to use to excuse the lack of process that the city has followed, including posting a notice. All of the signs that I have seen the city post, it's really quite amazing, including street signs, that limit parking so homeless people can't be there, and running them out of neighborhoods. It's amazing that they couldn't post a notice for the coastal application for this. 14 miles of beach, that's a lot. And, and the city really focused on how they were notifying the people within 100 feet. But who is within 100 feet? You have to think, the affluence of these people, they don't want homeless people around them. They have money. They bought this $1 million property, $2 million property, $3 million properties, and more. The fact is, it's a bad law. It wasn't thought out. And the Coastal Act mandates maximizing access, a special use permit that they decide whether you get to be on that beach for a huge part of the night does not equal maximizing access. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And you hit right at 10 minutes, ma'am. I didn't know if you had a clock on or not. Oh, okay. Yeah. Appellant Eric Arias. An estimate of your time, sir?
10 to 12, probably 10.
The one thing that we ask is I will shorten that if you are repetitive to what we just heard.
Oh, I promise you, I'm bringing all fresh
Go ahead.
stuff. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Eric Arias. I'm here representing the Southern California Homeless Bill of Rights Coalition. I believe you all have a presentation. Before I get into that, I just wanted to say a couple statements in response to Mr. Mundy. I want to make it clear that although the law has been in place for 30 years, that really is irrelevant in this case because the law was never subjected to the Coastal Act. I also want to make it clear that he presented the Coastal Commission's request as that they would like the city to go back as far back and get a coastal development permit. As far back as 2009, it was the Coastal Commission that actually had sent letters saying that it is a requirement. It's not that they preferred it, it is a requirement of the Coastal Act as far back as almost 10 years ago that the city needed a coastal development permit and that it was operating in violation of that. I would also just say 30 years later, we're here today 10 years after the Coastal Commission had made it clear that the city needed a permit because there was a community effort to maximize public space and there was a lawsuit that was brought against the city regarding the violation of the Coastal Act and the illegal beach curfew, Valentine versus Los Angeles. I think that's important to note on the record. I would also like to say before I get into my presentation that another piece that we brought up in our appeal was that the evidence provided by the city in its application for the CDP does not support the city engineer's finding that the development is in conformity with public access and public recreation policies under the California Coastal Act. I want to highlight one thing in specific that we brought up in our appeal, which is that the city's engineer engineer's permit does not distinguish in any way the various beaches covered underneath this code. The city has acknowledged, though, that the beaches covered by the curfew present different challenges. For example, there is only 17 crimes reported on Dockweiler Beach over a 7-year span. 17 crimes over a 7-year span at Dockweiler Beach. This is according to the permit application itself. We're talking about 14 miles of beach. That is a lot of public space that this covers. And there is substantially less crime and very little crime at Dockweiler, Will Rogers, Wilder's Addition, and Cabrillo Beach. And so this city permit, which covers the entirety of that 14 miles, goes way beyond what is necessary, even if you were to accept the premise that this is necessary for public safety, which we do not. So it is critical to public access for 14 miles, and there is nothing in the report or the application that justifies why it's necessary. In fact, they talk about how there's very little crime in a lot of those areas, and therefore very little need for public safety measures in areas where there's no crime essentially over 7 years. Okay, but really I want to talk today about the presentation that I presented to you. I want to apologize. There's a small typo. Of course, it's appeal to CDP 1707. It was just a small typo that I made. So, if you turn to the first page, we are maintaining that the city failed to provide notice as required by both LA Municipal Code and the Coastal Act. LAMC requires the notice of a permit. At the time of the application is submitted for filing, the applicant must post in a conspicuous place, easily read by the public, and as close as possible to the site of the proposed development, a notice that an application has been made for a coastal development permit. Such notice shall contain specific information as to the nature of the proposed development and be in the form as prescribed for that purpose. Now, that is not necessarily, I'm not talking about the hearing, which Mr. Muddy brought up. I'm talking about the notice of the permit itself, which was never posted. I'll also say that the Coastal Act and its implementing regulations contain similar requirements. If you look at the next slide, the report that you were given for this hearing states that notices that the coastal development permit application was filed were posted at Will Rogers State Beach, Venice Beach, Dockweiler Beach, Wilder's Addition Park, and Outer Cabrillo Beach. There is no evidence in the report that supports this. And actually, the only evidence in the record, which is the declaration of the posting that was submitted as part of the city's permit application, it actually contradicts this. And I'll get to that too, which we've included in the packet. The notice.
Sir, I'm going to tell you that it's the same argument, and I've got the same page from the presentation that we heard again. So
gotcha.
You are repeating what we've already heard.
Okay, I'll skip that one. But I will say that what it wasn't said is that I also, just for the record, in addition to the previous appellant, have photographic evidence of all these beaches, and there was no evidence ever recorded. And I want to highlight that the report that you have contradicts what was presented before you. Because the city did not properly provide notice of the permits, and pursuant to the city's own policies, the permit application should not have been accepted for filing. Quote, if the applicant fails to post the complete notice form and sign the declaration of posting, the city staff shall refuse to file the application. The permit should therefore not have been granted because the issue of notice was raised to the city engineer at the public hearing itself. We raised this at the hearing itself prior to the issue of the permits. And therefore the appeal should be granted because there is no evidence supporting at the last minute in your reports that the notice was posted. We have never seen any evidence that the notice was posted. This undermines the public process. This is something that is, given the critical nature of public access for 14 miles of the state beach, we ask that you grant the appeal. I also think to help correct the record that Mr. Mundy spoke to, it is very specific. There was a lawsuit that came that sort of was the impetus of where we're at today, Valentine versus the city of Los Angeles. Mr. James, there was a comment card submitted. According to the clerk, it was submitted too late by the attorney who was as a part of that lawsuit. I would ask that the attorney be allowed to come to correct Mr. Mundy's testimony regarding the right of reservation and other things that he had mentioned that were legal matters. I have about 5 minutes left. There's an attorney, Shayla Myers, who is here, and because of the critical nature of the statements that were made on the record, I would ask that she be allowed 2 minutes of time that I would cede from my time to correct some of the statements that he was made.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you. My name is Shayla Myers. I'm an attorney at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, and I'm one of the attorneys of record in Valentine versus City of Los Angeles. I had submitted a general comment card because I don't think the reason that the city is here seeking a coastal development permit is relevant to the issue that is before the board. But because there was a question that was submitted and Mr. Mundy took it upon himself to answer that question, I just want to make sure that the record is perfectly clear. Mr. Ara has made it clear that since 2009, the Coastal Commission has submitted letters to the City of Los Angeles stating very explicitly that the city's coastal development permit is void without a coastal development permit. So it was not simply an issue that the Coastal Commission would like to see the City of Los Angeles submit a coastal development permit, which is the process obviously before the city engineer and this board, but rather that without a coastal development permit, the ordinance was void and unenforceable. In 2015, Jatan Valentine and Francesca De La Rosa filed a lawsuit against the City of Los Angeles, arguing that, in fact, the ordinance that is before you was void without a coastal development permit. In 2017, the court in that case ruled that the curfew in front of you was a development for which the city was required to seek a coastal development permit unless other exceptions applied. Subsequent to that ruling, the city, and another ruling related to the grandfathering of this ordinance, the City of Los Angeles and the City Council ruled that they would then seek this coastal development permit under a reservation of rights. Obviously, like I said, that's not part of the particular issue before you, but because a question was posed to Mr. Mundy, and I believe he provided inaccurate information, I wanted to correct the record. And I will note that the city attorney who is working on that case as well is in the room, and he can verify that as well, the status of the lawsuit. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, but I think that it's important that the full history and perspective of both the Coastal Commission staff as well as the court that has ruled on these particular issues be part of the record before you, since again that question was posed.
Well, and you've put it before the record, haven't you?
And I'm happy to answer any questions that one.
And you're going to have one. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, in summary, you're basically saying that the existing ordinance upon which the department is making its recommendation, that in fact that ordinance is not valid.
That was the position that the Coastal Commission staff had taken. That was also the position that we have taken in the lawsuit. Obviously, the plaintiffs in that case believe that as well.
Let me ask, in that, did they put that in writing to you in terms of the Coastal Commission staff or not?
Sure. Since 2009, the Coastal Commission staff have submitted numerous letters to the City of Los Angeles stating that the City of Los Angeles was required to seek a coastal development permit for the curfew that's in front of you. And in 2000, and I believe 2014, the Coastal Commission Senior Counsel took the position that the ordinance, absent a coastal development permit, was void.
And did they, you don't know any communications that might have ensued as a result of their discussion with you about the status of the particular ordinance we're talking about? You don't know if they sent letters to us. I will ask our staff on that, so thank you for your information.
And there are significant documents that were exchanged between the Coastal Commission and the City Attorney's Office, both the previous administration and the current administration, prior to the filing of the lawsuit. The latest was in 2014, and then again in 2015, the two plaintiffs in this case filed the lawsuit, Valentine versus City of LA.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Thank you, ma'am. No further questions? You can say whatever you like.
My light's already on.
Ed, I wanted to, as a result of our discussion, to touch bases with you in terms of any communication we have received, and is in fact it valid that the Coastal Commission has told us that the ordinance is not appropriate.
You know, First of all, I'm not directly aware of the communications received that have been described, but more importantly, those are not issues that are before the board. This is an appeal under section 12.20.2, subsection H of Coastal Development Permit 17-70 for the various grounds raised in the appeals. A number of the appeals raised the notice issue, which you've heard described here. Appeals have raised issue about consistency with the Coastal Act, as has been described and conceded by counsel from the Valentine case. The issue of whether the issues raised about whether the coastal permit is needed is not an issue before the board. That issue is described in the permit itself. There's a statement that the permit application was filed with a reservation. Again, none of that issue is before the board. What's the issue are the issues raised in the appeal, primarily notice and the consistency with the Coastal Act. So I want to make sure the board understands what it is before the board and what is not before the board. Sure. So while it's interesting background information, I would urge the board to not be unduly focused on things that are not before it.
So even though this information came to us, and certainly it's perhaps something for the courts, our information that had been given prior to the testimony of the lawyer was that there is a concern about safety, and that then therefore there is a recommendation from the Bureau or the department about how they think we should proceed in terms of better monitoring the beach. So the latter information is what we need to focus on, is what you're telling us, as opposed to this issue that obviously is something for the courts to decide.
The issue as to whether or not this constitutes development that requires a coastal development permit is really an issue for the courts and not for the board. The underlying factual basis for the issuance of the permit, notice which has been raised on appeal, those are the issues before the board.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. So we have some speaker card. Thank you. You're clear? Okay. We have some speaker cards on this item, so we will go through the speaker cards in what appears to be the order that I have them. We have Dr. Campos. I need your.
Sorry, what was that, Mr. President?
So we're going to go through the speaker cards right now.
Okay.
So set the clock. I'll call you first. Yes. So set the clock for 1 minute.
1 minute. Thank you.
And Lydia, I'm sorry I don't have your last name, but I remember your first name. So go right ahead.
I apologize. I just have an appointment and I have to make copies of files.
Go ahead.
Venice Beach. The city failure for 18 years plus to protect affordable housing is why we have so many unhoused. The Business Improvement District currently supports the curfew because their restaurants and bars remain open until 2 a.m., so this ordinance privatizes our public beaches. As Native American indigenous people, we're only considered citizens of the United States since 1924. Our Religious Freedom of Act 1978 protects and preserves our traditional religious rights anywhere, anytime at our sacred sites. The ocean, the beach, is our sacred site. This ordinance infringes upon my rights and many others that could not be here today. The use and possession of objects considered sacred is the ocean, it's the beach, it's the sand. So this ordinance goes against my rights to pray when I need to before sunrise, when we have water ceremonies, and we've had them, void of violence, void of crime. We're praying for everyone. That's my federal right. My federal right trumps state right and city ordinances.
Thank you, ma'am.
30 years old.
Jed Palkin.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to mention that the using email blocks to submit testimony lacks the kind of weight that the testimony that we submit when we bring our bodies here and present today. I hope you acknowledge the fact that the time we took and our physical presence. Second, I'll go straight to my analysis points because of the time. Calling a relevant, this is on analysis point G, calling a relevant regulation out of the scope of the application fails to address the cumulative negative impact issue at all of a population already harmed by city policies and practices. Taking taking a similar approach, a parochial approach to regulation. When the scope of the city's emergencies crosses several regulatory boundaries, taking a parochial scope is insufficient. Lastly, find me a beach whose 100 block of residential properties does not suffer from higher crime than eastward areas. The applicant is trying to solve one problem.
1 minute.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, wrap up.
Thank you. The problem the applicant says that the applicant is trying to solve with this regulation will solve one problem, but it's not going to solve the problem that it says it's going to solve.
Thank you, sir. Andrew Rasmussen, and then after Mr. Rasmussen, we're going to call David Bush.
Mr. President, if I may interject, just for clarification in the record, in taking a look at Ms. Peggy Lee Kennedy's appeal, and I believe she did make this point in her oral statement, but I just want to read something just to make sure that I didn't create any, inadvertently create any confusion in the record. So one of her grounds for appeals was legal, I'm just reading from her appeal, legal process is violated whereby a coastal permit must be approved first by providing just cause prior to the enforcement of a substantial beach closure. That is a ground that she stated in her appeal. She stated it in her comments. However, that really pertains more to the issues before the court, not the issues before the board. Again, the issues before the board are the adequacy of this particular permit based on the record before you, specifically the findings that are made plus the issue of the notice. But I did want to just clarify for the record that she included that in her statement of appeal.
That's fine. People can include all kinds of things in their appeals, and the board either has jurisdiction over it or doesn't. We've got the matter before us.
I agree. Just wanted to make sure I didn't create any errors in the record.
Well, but just because somebody puts something in an appeal doesn't mean that the Board of Public Works has jurisdiction over it. Mr. Rasmussen, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Andrew Rasmussen. I'm a homeowner in the Marina Peninsula. I attended the October 5th hearing, and thank you for your time and attention today. Turning our beaches into tent cities is not a good solution to the homeless issue. It's going to cause extreme risks to sanitation, crime prevention, property values, and economics for the city, and I urge you, therefore, to please retain the curfew. Thank you very much.
Next. And then after David Bush, we have Dolores Palacio.
Hi, Commissioners. Wish we had a little more time. It's a very important issue. A lot has been said here today about homeless people. I'm a homeless person. And that's a word that conjures up pictures, unfortunately, that I don't think really describe the people out there. Many people I know sleeping in tents and in vehicles in Venice Beach are working in the restaurants and in the hotels. Many people, like myself, who lived in Venice Beach and worked as a bus mechanic for the city from 1980 to 1987 and lived there from 80 to 83, are former residents. This is an issue not of homeless people, it's an issue of housing. We don't have a flood of homeless people into the beach area. We have a flood of rich people. We do not have access to affordable housing in the beach area. It's a violation of the Coastal Act. And until we have that access, we have a right to have access to RVs, and tents, and whatever. That's a violation of the California Coastal Act to put a curfew on there. I'd like to just add one thing.
You can wrap up, sir, just like the last man.
This is an abusive process to ban people from putting up tents on the sand or parking their vehicles in beach parking lots in one committee hearing, and then and saying there's other alternatives such as sleeping on the beach or sleeping in the boardwalk, which this permit won't affect. And then at another hearing,
Thank you, sir.
saying we're closing up the park for public safety. This is an abusive process.
Thank you. Ms. Palacio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm a resident who lives in Playa del Rey at the north end of Dockweiler Beach, and I am hopeful that the curfew will not be lifted. I attended the meeting that was held in Westchester after listening to many to the many voices in favor of lifting the curfew because of the needs of the homeless, primarily in Venice, I realized then that we are talking about completely different populations using the beach after midnight. Where we live, it is not the homeless who are lighting fires on the beach where there are no pits at the north end. On windy nights, we see the embers floating through the air toward our homes. It is not the homeless who are setting off firecrackers, including the very loud ones, which used to be called cherry bombs. It is not the homeless who are parked on the street, blasting loud music, drinking and eating in cars, and then throwing out food, needles, and used condoms in our yards or on the streets. All of this happens long after midnight, and that is with a curfew in place, but unfortunately not enforced because of lack of police ability to be every
1 minute.
place. I hate to imagine what would happen without a curfew. For safety's sake, we ask that the curfew not be lifted.
Thank you. We have David Ewing and then Becky Dennison. Mr. Ewing.
Good morning, Mr. James and board members. Erica Lee asked if she could cede her minute to me as well.
No.
No? Okay. What you have here is, first of all, I just want to mention, you're acting here as administrators of a state statute. And I know you're aware of that, but the city often struggles with that. This is an unusual situation, and the city struggles with that. So it is the California Coastal Act that you're concerned with here. Article 2, Section 30210 requires that maximum public access be provided. Section 30211 says development shall not interfere with the public's right of access. The problem here is that the city is trying to apply a one-size-fits-all solution to 5 different beaches
1 minute.
in 4 separate coastal zones. And they haven't done the work, and they haven't made the findings. They've made statements, and they're not backed up by fact. Those are not findings. They need to make real findings. They're trying to legalize something that was done illegally for years, that was on the books illegally for years because they hadn't gotten a coastal development permit. And now they're trying to legalize that, legitimize that, without doing the requisite work to back it up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Dennison?
Good morning. I'm Becky Dennison with Venice Community Housing. We are here in support of the appeal and the appellants. We also believe that this ordinance was not properly done and also severely restricts coastal access for all of us in Los Angeles who do not live near the beach and or have no place else to stay. So I want to first say on the public safety issue, there's no risk of any tent city popping up on a beach. It is separately illegal to camp on a beach. To sweep across 5 beaches of the city of Los Angeles with no evidence of real public safety, with beaches within that same swath, Santa Monica, the South Bay, who have no beach curfew and have no additional public safety issues, is just beyond my comprehension. As someone who used to live at the beach and understands how lucky it is to have 24-hour access to the coast, I believe in the California Constitution and the Coastal Act because everybody has the same right to do so without these types of severe restrictions, and I urge you to support the appeal.
Thank you, ma'am. Erica Lee?
Hi, I'm Erica Lee. I'm also here in support of the appeal and repealing the curfew. I have been a longtime Los Angeles resident using Bull Rogers Beach and particularly Venice Beach. I've lived in Los Angeles for almost my whole life. And I think this wrongfully criminalizes the homeless. If I were on the beach at 2 a.m., I don't know how this would be enforced, but I don't think I would receive a ticket. I have been on the beach at 2 a.m. before and have not received a ticket. This wrongfully criminalizes people, as other people have said, and it should be repealed.
Thank you, ma'am. Julie White?
Hello. I would like to say that the homeowners are fighting the same battle with the new bond that you put up, the new bond that came through in Los Angeles. It is so hard. I'm hearing that You cannot get a place to build a small building because everybody, like the homeowners, are there to protest. And it's the same with the beach. They shouldn't close the beach if there's not enough housing for people. And if the same people in Los Angeles don't want any housing built near where they live, then they should look there first before. And I urge you not to close the beaches. And it is correct, they are not camping. That's a separate issue. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Those are all the speaker cards that we have. Mr. Mundy, or LAPD, or Rec and Parks, whichever. The board report references public notice. And I just want to read the statement that's in the board report, but if the statement is accurate, I want you to confirm it for us on the record. Even though the board report is part of the record, it's not part of the oral record, okay? Public notice, Los Angeles Municipal Code, section 12.20.2E through F, specifies the procedures for notice to the public of a CDP application. Notices that a coastal development permit application, CDP application, was filed were posted at Will Rogers State Beach, Venice Beach, Dockweiler Beach, Wilder's Addition Park, and Outer Cabrillo Beach. A total of 2,518 notices of the public hearing were mailed to owners and occupants of property within 100 feet of city-owned beach area property lines and to interested parties. These procedures complied with the requirements of Los Angeles Municipal Code section 12.20.2.E through F, and it is signed by the city engineer, Gary Lee Moore. The confirmation of compliance is confirmed here?
Yes, the statement you just read is correct and described in detail how the requirements for public notice were complied with in this procedure.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer detailed questions from commissioners. However, I'd like to make just one quick point here. I think it's important, it's crucial, in fact, that we focus on the item before us today. And what we're discussing here today is a coastal development permit for a specific section of the municipal code. That's the limit of the discussion today. I've heard issues raised, certainly very serious social issues, such as homelessness. The ordinance we're talking about and the coastal development permit doesn't change in any way laws relating to camping on beaches, to living on beaches. Those are separate subjects. Similarly, lawsuits about this are beyond the scope of this hearing today. As you're well aware, you're not a legal body or a judicial body.
As much as I'd like to be a judge, I'm not.
Yes, unfortunately not. Therefore, we should focus on the specific issue and decision before you today.
Thank you. Commissioner Penning?
Just a couple questions. One of the speakers mentioned that there are adjacent beaches with no restrictions in terms of when people can access them. Can you just speak to that? I don't know if you, or maybe the LAPD, or I don't know if there's anyone here today who can talk to that.
Well, let me take a shot at that, and then we'll see. I believe the commenter was correct, specifically with reference to Santa Monica Beach. There, as far as I know, there are no restrictions on Santa Monica Beach that are similar to the restriction in the LA Municipal Code. Now, given that, it's important to recognize that the beach area in Santa Monica is much smaller than the LA beach area, and therefore presents maybe different issues relating to patrol by the Santa Monica Police Department and like that. So I think it's difficult to compare different areas. The LA beach area is unique in its length, in the fact that some of the beaches are very remote and, as the captain mentioned, very dark at night. So I hope that addresses your question.
It does. It another question about parks in our city. What are generally the, you know, the rules around when we open and close our parks? Are there parks that people can access at all hours?
I think Kathy can speak to that.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. With regards to parks, basically we maintain hours of operation. They do close in general at 10:30. For specific parks, it's listed by ordinance if it's a sunrise to sunset. So it's on a case-by-case basis based on those particular neighborhoods. But in general, the parks do close at specific times depending on the location. So in general, it's around 10:30.
Thank you, Commissioner Penning. Commissioner Davis.
So in terms of what we're proposing for closure here of the beach is at 10:30 as well?
The closure, the municipal code provision that is the subject of this coastal development permit proceeding limits or closes the beaches between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. So those hours are fewer than your typical park would be closed. As Kathy mentioned, those
So
hours
it's
are
midnight to 5 a.m.
So it's a smaller window of time that the beaches are closed than a typical park would be closed.
And the motivating factor for the ordinance was what? Why did the council initially implement the ordinance? Do you know?
To the best that we can understand, the current ordinance was enacted, as I said, in 1989, 30 years ago. And based on the legislative history we do have of that enactment, it's clear to us that the provision of the municipal code was enacted as a public safety measure.
Okay, to limit it from 12 to 5.
Correct. And the city council at that time thought such a limitation would be appropriate in terms of protecting public safety.
Okay, so public safety was the motivating factor. And is the LAPD still in the room? Officer, in terms of public safety, I know you might not know the specifics of the data, but do you have a general understanding in terms of the various incidences that have occurred on our beaches? Have we had an inordinate amount of violations occurring? And I do know, just generally, the 12 to 5 time of the day would probably present an opportunity for some people, but I don't know what the real facts are as it relates to those beaches.
Right, and you're right. I do not have with me today the number of citations or whatnot, or warnings for that matter, that we've issued after midnight, but I do know that speaking to the folks that run our beach detail, that there are frequent contacts with folks that try to make their way out past the dunes to camp overnight and that kind of thing. So it's an ongoing problem, even though it is currently restricted between midnight and 5 a.m.
Thank you, President James. Colleagues, I appreciate, and the public, I appreciate all the testimony and the deconstruction of the application and the backstory as well. Where I'm at is in terms of something that was brought up in terms of individual access for certain reasons and areas, and as a first voice person as well, I am very sensitive to Native peoples accessing the areas in order to do ritual, in order to pray, in order to heal, and this is me authentically, and matching that with the ordinances that take care of the larger public good and public safety. There's no argument there. I would like us to consider the ability for individuals, not through a special permit or a blanket special permit or something. In other places they have similar, and is in the state of Hawaii, where Native peoples are able to access and use their right to be able to access lands, a national park, if you will, Volcanoes National Park. I would like us to be flexible, our city, to consider when people want to access in that 12 to 5 period before dawn, where they can access the beach for regardless of which way this goes, for prayer, for ritual, for certain individual religious freedoms and expressions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to emphasize that the special use permit you referred to does provide an opportunity for activities such as you described, and that provision is currently in the municipal code and has been for the past 30 years.
Commissioner, does that permit it during the hours of 12 to 5 a.m.?
Yes, an individual may apply to the Department of Rec and Parks for a permit that would allow them to access the beaches between 12 a.m., midnight, and 5 a.m., and that such an application would be evaluated by Department of Recreation and Parks on a case-by-case
One would
basis.
just need to go to apply to the department for the appropriate permission at that given time for the specific reasons stated.
That's correct.
Religious or whatever.
Yeah, Commissioner, if I may add, just in the Coastal Development Permit 1707, the Bureau of Engineering recommended 2 special conditions. One of them is that the applicant shall post signage at each beach park covered by the ordinance, to the extent not already present, that lists beach hours and that notifies the public that special access to beach areas is available via permit. The notification should provide contact information to direct those wishing to apply for special use permits. So not only is that available, it will continue to be available, and that the signage will specifically include the notification of that availability of a special use permit.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Commissioner Penning?
Sure. This is a tough one, and I think, like Commissioner Jacinto, I philosophically believe that public space should be available to the public. I hear a lot of issues brought up today related to housing affordability, related to people feeling criminalized, to the homeless crisis. Big issues. I know a lot of people in this room have worked for years on those issues, and I feel the work that they've done, and I on the one hand, I fight that fight with them. We're here today as practical policymakers. I think that to change what has basically been the way that we've been operating these beaches, I don't see a compelling reason to change that here today. It's consistent with the way that we handle our park spaces in the city. It's not a closure, it's a restriction that is really about our ability as a city to provide the resources that we need. If we can't provide the public safety resources needed to keep these open, then it's not really responsible for us, because a lot of times it's not just about protecting, it's actually about protecting the people who would use these spaces during those hours. And if we can't say that we can safely allow people, then that's, for me, that's where my mind is on this. And I think there are a lot of legal issues. There are a lot of things that are really beyond the work of our board. Our board is, I think, really to look at just the practical matter at hand. And so I am going to vote to deny the appeal. But I do so, part of me wishes I could vote differently, but that is how I will vote today. Thank you.
Okay. I have a thought on this as well that I want to add. Hearing all the arguments, I'm going to approach this from a bit more of a procedural place. I see what can be possibly taken, we'll see, as in the future, I suppose, depending on our action today, as an opportunity to get around or get through an existing ordinance that the city council passed. They're elected, we're not. And so I agree with your points, Commissioner Repenning, regarding the concern of our ability to provide safety if we were to allow, because that's the effect of our action, would be to allow the beach to be open 24 hours. We have heard from 3 different city departments that have recommended against that, including the Los Angeles Police Department. We have no indication that we have the budget ability or authority to be able to open the beach from midnight to 5 a.m. And I don't think that this is the proper venue to change the ordinance that has been in effect since at least 1989. I think that action needs to be taken, if it is to be taken by the City Council, not by the Board of Public Works, through this interesting, creative permit process with through the Coastal Act. As the ordinance, I recognize there may be legal challenges to the ordinance, but it's been very well established. We're not the court to decide the legal challenges to the ordinance either. My vote, Commissioner Penning, would be consistent with yours to take the recommendation of the Bureau of Engineering, the Department of Recreation and Parks, and the Los Angeles Police Department to deny the appeal to the applicant's request for this permit. I will add, for the record, to Commissioner Asento's point, to Commissioner Davis's questions regarding the availability, and actually all 3 of my colleagues, Commissioner Penning, you made this point earlier as well, regarding the special use permit that is available, as Mr. Jordan just indicated, for use beyond the ordinance. There are exceptions in the ordinance, and there, with that permit application process, comes the safety concern that we have. If an application is successful and the city grants it, then that use of the beach is known about. And all of the requisite agencies that need to know about that use of this public space in those hours in the dark of night, as the LAPD has described, is available. And I think that is, I know it doesn't satisfy the appellants, but it does provide a hybrid of relief of sorts that I think makes our action today that I'm advocating more palatable and easier to accomplish. So those are my thoughts on this. I would be voting along with Commissioner Penning. Commissioner Davis.
I appreciate the testimony that we've had from the citizens here today, and certainly I am very empathetic and sympathetic to many of the issues that have been brought to us, namely having access to the beaches at all times, and also to the homeless issue and the housing issue that we have in the city that is consistently being worked on by our council, as President James has stated. Additionally, the mayor's office has been working in terms of public policy and administration on creating solutions and developing a plan and a footprint from which we can get some solutions to our homeless problem. And it's a very tough and dynamic problem, and I'm sensitive, again, to all of those issues. Yet in my role and responsibilities as a member of the Board of Public Works, representing the city of Los Angeles, not only just the constituents who receive services, but also the men and women who deliver the services. And to that end, in my role as a member of the Board of Public Works, I want to make sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt and without any hesitation, that we give the tools necessary for those men and women who deliver services to be able to do so efficiently and also effectively. Therefore, it is very clear to me that I believe that our parks should be safe and that they should not create an unnecessary opportunity for individuals to be harmed in any way, and that those who are delivering services, our city workers at every level who are involved, having the opportunity to effectively manage it. So I support the appeal for that specific reason. And I do so without hesitation, knowing that for those individuals who do have civil liberties, that as President James has stated and as our city worker was able to answer my question, that in fact there is a permit that will give us an opportunity to review and make a decision to create that opportunity for you to have access in those hours in which we regulate very closely and responsibly from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. So having said that, I believe strongly that this is the most responsible thing that needs to be done for the city of Los Angeles to deliver what it should in terms of, one, making sure that the park is managed 24 hours. And that means from 12 to 5 equally. And I believe that denying of this appeal and supporting the recommendation of our department is in the best interest of the entire city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. So that will be on Commissioner Repenning's motion. I'll second it. Any objection? Without objection, that'll be the order. The appeal is denied. The recommendations of the Bureau are upheld. Any issue sending it forthwith? We will send it forthwith. Thank you all. You have a question?
Thank you, Commissioners, especially for your reflections on the issues before us today. And on behalf of the 3 city departments that are here, I'd like to say we're listening to you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Campos, have we cleared the desk?
I believe this takes you back to the approval of the minutes.
Is there a second to my motion that we approve the meeting minutes of the meeting of December 15th, 2017 by Commissioner Repenning? Any objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved. We have now cleared the desk?
Yes, you have.
And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.